Before the bell ever rang, there was the silence. Not the calm, comfortable quiet we associate with modern classrooms, but a heavy stillness that sat on your shoulders. Rows of wooden desks faced forward, lids closed, backs straight, hands folded. No one spoke, no one dared. You could hear shoes in the corridor, chalk resting on the ledge, even the slow ticking of the clock above the blackboard. This was an ordinary morning in a 1960s British school. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual. And that is what makes it so startling today. The routines, the posture, the unspoken rules were simply how things were done. Children learned quickly to blend into the background, to wait, to watch, to comply. Today, such silence would raise eyebrows. Back then, it was expected. And this was only the beginning. It shaped first impressions of authority, learning, and childhood in ways we still carry today. To understand those classrooms, we have to step outside them. Britain, in the years after the war, was a country rebuilding itself, brick by brick and habit by habit. Authority mattered, rules mattered. They were seen as the glue holding society together after years of uncertainty. Schools reflected that mindset. Classrooms were crowded, resources were limited, and one teacher might be responsible for 30 or 40 children at once. Order was not a preference. It was a necessity. Clear rules kept lessons moving and ensured fairness in an overstretched system. At home, children were expected to listen rather than negotiate. Adults were rarely questioned, and respect was taught early, often without explanation. Education followed the same pattern. Firm boundaries were believed to shape strong, reliable citizens, ready for work and responsibility. Seen through modern eyes, it can feel severe. But at the time, strict discipline was not viewed as unkind. It was seen as preparation, a way of equipping young people for a world that demanded resilience, patience, and obedience. To understand the classroom, you first have to understand the society that built it. There was also little discussion about feelings or individual needs. Uniformity was valued, and routine brought reassurance to parents and teachers alike. In an era of rationed books and careful planning, predictability felt safe. Schools were not meant to nurture expression, but to maintain structure, rhythm, and certainty during a time when stability mattered deeply. That context explains why discipline felt unavoidable, even sensible then, everywhere. The rules were everywhere, yet rarely written down. You learned them by watching. When an adult entered the room, chairs scraped back in unison, bodies rose, eyes fixed forward. No one asked why. It was simply done. The sound alone told you whether you'd moved quickly enough. There were routines for everything. Hands up, backs straight, shoes polished, collars neat. If work fell short, lines were copied carefully, again and again, until the lesson was learned through repetition. Corrections happened in front of everyone. Brief and unmistakable, delivered so the whole room understood the standard expected. What lingers in memory is the atmosphere. Footsteps in the corridor slowed conversations to nothing. A raised eyebrow could quiet a class. The feeling of being watched kept order long before a word was spoken. Children became experts at reading moods, adjusting behavior, staying just inside the lines. At the time, none of this felt remarkable. It was the rhythm of the day, as familiar as the register or the lunch queue. Looking back now, it's astonishing how constant it all was, how daily life was shaped by these small rituals. Most people today have no idea how ordinary this once felt and how deeply it settled into childhood memories. These habits followed pupils beyond the gate into homes and workplaces, teaching them when to speak, when to stay still, and how to measure themselves against expectations that were shared, silent, and rarely explained aloud by adults who assumed everyone already understood the rules. Every classroom had its own quiet hierarchy, understood without a single chart on the wall. At the top stood the teacher, not just as an instructor, but as the undisputed authority in the room. Their presence alone could shift the air. Eyes conversations faded, shoulders stiffened, and attention snapped into place. There was a low-level tension that never fully disappeared. Not panic, but awareness. You learned to sense when a line was being approached long before it was crossed. Consequences were rarely spelled out in detail, yet everyone knew they existed. That knowledge kept order far more effectively than long explanations ever could. Respect, in that setting, was not negotiated or discussed. It was assumed. Children absorbed it through routine, repetition, and observation. You watched older pupils, copied their behavior, and understood where you stood. Authority was something external, solid, and largely unquestioned. Today, classrooms are filled with dialogue. Expectations are explained, feelings acknowledged, reasons given. Back then, understanding came from watching and remembering. You learned when to speak by noticing who had spoken before. You learned limits by seeing what happened when someone ignored them. For many, this shaped a lifelong relationship with authority. It taught people how to read a room, how to stay alert, how to adapt quietly. Whether that felt reassuring or intimidating often depended on the child, but there is no denying its reach. This atmosphere did more than manage lessons. It shaped how an entire generation understood power, respect, and their own place within a structured world long after the final bell faded away into memory. What stayed longest was not the rules themselves, but what they left behind. For some, those classrooms built resilience. They learned to concentrate, to listen, to carry themselves with quiet confidence. Structure felt familiar, even comforting, and the discipline translated into working life and adulthood. For others, the memory is more complicated. Silence became a habit. Speaking up felt risky. Mistakes lingered longer than lessons. The same routines that steadied one child could unsettle another, teaching caution where curiosity once lived. What matters is not deciding whether it was right or wrong, but recognizing its influence. A generation grew up navigating expectations without discussion, learning strength through endurance rather than encouragement. Many carried that approach into parenting, workplaces, and relationships, often without realizing where it began. Looking back now with decades of distance, feelings soften. There is room for pride, for sadness, even for gratitude. You survived it after all. But survival is only part of the story. The quieter question lingers, unspoken but persistent. Did those classrooms prepare us for life, or did they simply shape us into people who learn to endure, adapt, and move forward without asking too much of the world around them at the time? Step into a classroom today, and the atmosphere feels different straight away. There is conversation, explanation, and understanding that children arrive with emotions as well as exercise books. Boundaries still exist, but they are discussed, not simply absorbed. That shift did not happen by accident. It grew from remembering experiences like those of the 1960s and asking how childhood could be better protected. The old methods have faded because society itself moved on. The classroom changed because Britain changed, carrying its past forward, not to repeat it, but to learn from it. And that story still quietly echoes today, everywhere.